This talk is dedicated to my parents who managed to survive through pre-war and war years. My story, or my family's story, has many facets. Where to begin is difficult. On June 27, 1941, that my parents, my sister, and I came to the United States. I was born in Strasbourg, France, which is on the border of Germany and France with the Rhine River, almost like New York, where you have the Hudson River between New Jersey and New York. We were on the last ship that left Marseille, called the Winnipeg. In my primary years, birth to 4 or 5 years of age, we moved from Strasbourg, where most of my father's family lived. Then we lived in Laure, Germany for a little while. Then we moved to The Hague, but it wasn't really a move, it was supposed to be a visit. We were in Holland longer because I got the whooping cough there, and I had to stay upstairs in the attic for 4 weeks so I wouldn't infect my cousins in the building. For a few months, I went to nursery school after the whooping cough, and I had to learn Dutch, having only German and French in my vocabulary. And that was, among other things, a difficult time when you can't really speak the language. In 1939, we had to move to Saumur, which is in the middle of France if we show the map. The French government actually transferred Strasbourg citizens, Jewish and not Jewish, to Périgueux. But my family decided that Saumur still would be a better place to go. It was in the center of France. And at that time, they were just arranging the Ligne Maginot. So we went to Saumur. Strasbourg was the first place that the Germans took over because it was right across the Rhine River. A few weeks after we were in Saumur, my sister was born. Immediately after my sister was born, the French interned all people who had questionable citizenship. My father having that, because he was born in Strasbourg in 1893 when Strasbourg was still German. It became French in 1918 when the war was over, and therefore he was French. But all that had to be proved in court, not easy to do. So right after Danny was born, my father was put in a French internment camp, Camp du Richard. The Germans advanced through France. The Ligne Maginot was a line of imagination, which the French word says, because it never existed and was never respected. As the time continued and we were in Saumur, my family realized that we couldn't stay in Saumur. So they sent me to southern France, together with my father's sister, her husband, and one son. And we were supposed to stay in a little French village called Mérac. And promptly Laure got the measles. The worst case, again, the doctor said he had never seen such a bad case of measles. So they kept me in a dark room for 4 weeks or more. Only my uncle had been a doctor, and he had learned in medical school 40 years or 50 years before that measles you stay in a dark room. So in a dark room I was for weeks on end, mainly with Swiss cheese, which I hadn't touched afterwards for 40 years. From there, my mother and the 2-week-old baby, that was the next problem. Where should they go? And they decided they had to go to Périgueux. Périgueux was the city where Strasbourg was officially sent. And so they had trouble figuring out how to get to Périgueux and leave Saumur, which one could see was going to be occupied by the Germans shortly. So they took 3 bicycles. My aunt, her son of 15, and my mother, after having had a baby 2 to 3 weeks before, and put that baby in a basket. And that basket my mother has kept all these years. And even the towel that she wrapped the baby in is still in that basket. So they left Saumur with the 3 bicycles and with the baby in the basket, and only the most needed necessities. The trip is about 160 miles. My aunt, her son of 15, arrived in Périgueux about 20 days later, sleeping in the fields on the side of the road, wherever they could find this place that looked safe. During the trip, they stopped at a farm to see if they could get some milk for the baby. The farmer's wife also had a new baby and was very friendly. She already had the birth certificate for that new baby, and she traded her birth certificate, which she knew she could replace, and she gave my mother the dry milk, and for that my mother gave her her gold watch that my father had given her. So if you often see a gold watch with a gold bracelet like little bricks, it's not a coincidence if you see that on my sister or me and my daughters, because we have supplied everybody in the family with gold watches that could save your life. The trip continued pretty quietly, and they got to Périgueux and found an old-looking house. I do remember what it looked like, more like a barn. Nearby, there was a soup kitchen arranged by the joint. The rabbi there was trying to help people both feed them and find out about their future. When my mother heard about that and she talked to him about it, he told her that my father had been there for soup the day before. He remembered him. My mother would come the next day and she could find him. And that's exactly how they found each other, in that joint soup kitchen. Then came the big problem. My parents were both in Périgueux with the baby, but I was still in Mérac in the north of France with an aunt and uncle, and they had to figure out how to retrieve me. My aunt, who had this 15-year-old son, was a very brave woman, and she dressed as a farmer, got on the train, which was an illegal thing to do, and brought me back to Périgueux. We left Marseille about May 5th, 1941, on the Winnipeg. But on the trip, the English captured our boat because they knew that there were Nazis on it. We got to Trinidad at gunpoint in order that the English could check everybody's papers in Trinidad. We stayed in Trinidad for about 6 weeks and came to the United States on 27th, 1941, which is how I began my story by telling you how many years ago that was. And I thank each one of you individually for spending your time and listening. Thank you for coming. Thank you